access in small island developing states, call for action. Okay, thank you. Yes, I've been given the thumbs up to say let's go now. Um, Welcome again. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for being here for the session on climate change finance access in small island developing states, call for action. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of this topic at this COP. I think many of you know the negotiations on finance, setting the new quantified goals, even finding a definition on climate finance, and also really having discussions on what this means for the transformation that we need for the whole world. But here we are really going to focus on small island developing states. My name is Achala Besingha. I am the Director and Head of Programs for Asia at the Global Green Growth Institute. Before I became the Director of Asia, I was also the Country Director in Papua New Guinea of GGGI, and really worked on this climate finance discussion, worked on the readiness to Green Climate Fund. We also prepared the enhanced NDC of Papua New Guinea. So quite a lot of actions in the small island, one of the small island countries in the Pacific. And GGGI also has quite a lot of work in the Pacific as well as Caribbean and island countries in Asia and Africa. But my role here today is to moderate this session. Since we are a bit behind, I'm actually going to open the session now by inviting Dr. Colin Young, who is the Executive Director of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center. Dr. Young, I'm extremely grateful for stepping in at the very last minute on behalf of, we got news from His Excellency Teo Fulusi, the Minister of Finance from Tonga wasn't feeling well, so he was supposed to do the keynote speech, and now we do have two keynote speakers actually. And let me start with Dr. Young to make a few remarks for opening the session. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you, Achala, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope I could give some justice to the Minister who is unfortunately unable to be here. I am Colin Young from the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, which is located in Belize. It is, the 5Cs is a intergovernmental organization set up by Caribbean heads of government to coordinate climate change responses in its 15 member states. We are an accredited entity to the Green Climate Fund, up to $50 million per project, and also to the Adaptation Fund, and we also mobilize climate finance from bilateral sources as well. And so over the years, obviously as SIDS and as a regional accredited entity, we would have had our shares of difficulty and challenges and frustrations in terms of mobilizing financing at scale on behalf of our countries. But at the same time, we work we have 15 member states, and we are currently working in 12 of those member states. And we have been able to mobilize 2 funding proposals from the Green Climate Fund of 88 million in grants combined, and over 100 million when we look at co-financing. Our current portfolio is 140 million US dollars, and we have an active pipeline of 500 million US dollars in the under the financial mechanisms of the convention. And so what is quite clear, and I think the brief for today's session is quite indicative of the challenges that we face. And even though the issue of adaptation finance, particularly for us, is important, and we know that that's about 20% of the climate finance that has been dispersed, and within the Green Climate Fund, we know that SIDS have only been allocated about 10% of the resources that have been distributed by the Green Climate Fund, which is about 1.4 billion in resources. And if you were to break that 1.4 billion into the geographic areas that SIDS cover, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific countries, and the Caribbean, you can see that there are very, very small resources that are being distributed, at least from the GCF, in some of the most vulnerable regions of the world. And while we struggle with the architecture, which you would hear our leaders consistently making the point that the international climate finance architecture is really not fit for purpose to be able to meet our needs. It's too fragmented. The requirements of the Adaptation Fund, the GCF, the bilateral sources, all having very different requirements, having the need to have their own procurement systems in some cases. We are managing a 12 million EU project. It's one set of procurement. And then we are managing bilaterals from the UK, another set of procurement requirements. We're managing from the Italians, another set of procurement. And it becomes absolutely difficult to be able to deal with that. And oftentimes, in terms of funding the NDCs or the climate change strategies, there are also different areas that they focus, and sometimes they focus in some of the same areas, so there's some duplication. In addition to the fragmentation in policies and procurement, there's also a tremendous differences in the eligibility criteria that we consistently face from our countries. They have different requirements. And then, of course, there's a whole continuum of eligibility, the intensiveness of and the length of the requirements to satisfy the donors. In the case of the Green Climate Fund, the 5Cs has 100 million in projects in Barbados. The first project of 45 million took 3 years to disbursement for a 5-year project, so you're talking about 8 years in total. The second project took 2 years, but the implementation is 5 years, so it's 7 years. Meanwhile, the impact from climate change-related disasters in these countries would have obviously changed the context substantially in some of these areas. In fact, in one of the projects, we are providing solar PV to pump as an energy backup to pump water in the case that there's a climate shock. And since that project took so long to get off the ground, that now the Barbados Light and Power has changed the requirements for feed-in to the grid, for grid-tied solar PV, which now requires a battery backup, which was not the situation at the time that the project was developed. So the length of time to get projects through the door obviously continues to be a very big barrier. And similarly, we have concerns around the misalignment to SIDS context, because a lot of the ODA eligible grants are sometimes not aligned to some of the priorities of the countries. Importantly, what I wanted to also highlight in terms of barriers to access, so all of what I've just mentioned there is what we would call demand constraints. We also have quite a bit of structural constraints within small island developing states. And this is, it's not that we don't have capacity, we just don't have enough of the capacity. We have very few people in some of our countries. It's one person who is the focal point for all of the climate-related projects, which obviously impact our absorptive capacity in the countries. And that is where a regional entity like the 5Cs, who provides both project development support as well as project management support, can help to unlock climate finance at scale to help build resilience in our country. Let me just say to wrap up, in terms of the negotiations and the lack of transparency in terms of defining even climate finance and meeting the $100 billion goal. Unless we get some clarity around that, then we're not seeing new and additional. Certainly, we are seeing earmarking through bilateral sources of resources, and then the speed and the scale obviously is a big concern. One of the challenges that it will be interesting to hear the experiences from our Pacific colleagues, but that we're finding with some of the donor entities is this issue of the amount of investment per capita. In small island developing states, and I would use the Caribbean as an example, St. Kitts and Nevis, the entire country has a population of 42,000 people. The island of Dominica, who was hit by a Category 5 hurricane that destroyed 226% of its GDP in 5 hours, has 72,000 people. So if we apply to the Green Climate Fund or other funds for a 40 million grant to transform the energy and water resilience infrastructure, and you divide the beneficiary, 2,000 or 3,000 direct beneficiaries, by 40 million, what you're hearing is that the per capita investment that is going to that particular country is too high. And if that is the case, then small island developing states will always be disproportionately and negatively impacted because we are small. We are small, we are vulnerable, and because we are small and vulnerable, our per capita investment is always going to be high, but we are also at the front line of the effects of climate change. And so that is now emerging, and we understand that funds are trying to maximize the number of direct beneficiaries, and we see that. But at the same time, this cannot become a de facto criteria for accessing climate finance. So I think what is clear is that countries need to have a very tailored approach to accessing climate finance, where once you have your NDCs, some of them have costed them, but a costing of an NDC is not an investment strategy, it's not an investment plan. And so you need to now turn the costing into an investment plan, and in that plan it's going to articulate what activities, what areas, what resilience will be built, and how it's going to be financed. Is it from concessional resources, which is a problem because we're mostly middle income? What is going to be from domestic resources? What is going to be from grant resources? And then what are the delivery channels that can help a country then access those types of resources? So while we are pushing to help our countries get direct access entities, usually when they get accredited, it's at the micro level of 10 million or below from the GCF. The 5Cs has a 50 million cap, and we're going for medium up to 250. And then the international accredited entities can go bigger. So you need to be able to package your investment strategy into an investment plan that is financed from different sources, including domestic as well as concessional resources that is possible, like what Barbados would have been able to do through the Resilience Trust at the World Bank. So let me stop there because I know it's last minute, but thank you for the invitation, and I was happy to come in and say a few words. Thank you, Achille.
Thank you, Dr. Ang. I mean, that was a very powerful speech. Thank you for highlighting all the challenges the small island developing states face. And I like the fact that you actually emphasize that very basic requirement of capacity strengthening, and the SIDS have been really at the forefront of bringing in a lot of capacities, but you are right, there is no enough capacity. And sometimes one focal point is responsible not only for all climate projects, but also for ozone discussion related, or biodiversity related discussions, all sorts of other conventions that they cover. And I also like the fact that you talked about the need for countries to think about the investment plan. Our countries have enough documents, strategies and plans, but they are very much just stay at the plan level unless we really convert them to proper costing as well as the proper bankable project pipeline. And what I'm realizing in my work now is developing a project takes around 12 to 18 months or even longer. And if your NDC is adopted today and we take another 5-year NDC, we take another 2 years to just to develop the project and get the funding, and another 2 years to disburse the funding. By the time we come to actual implementation, it's the time also to think about next round of NDC. And I hope that the next round of NDC, which is going to be submitted in 2025, we do take that also quite seriously. Thank you again. When we lost one keynote speaker, we actually ended up with 2 keynote speakers as alternatives. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Mr. Thomas Kuss, a government advisor from the government of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. Before I give you the floor, sir, I want to say that GGGI has a very, very special relationship with the government of Luxembourg. We actually manage the Sustainable Finance Trust Fund of Luxembourg. And I can tell you from my experience on the ground, this project has been running only for a very short period of time so far, but we are really making a big headway in terms of bringing in sustainable finance to our countries. And what the trust fund does is actually help us to develop a pipeline for our developing countries that we work in to conceptualize as well as develop that bankable pipeline on green bonds, on thematic bonds, on debt swaps for nature, and start developing the bond frameworks, start developing the ideas to really take the work to the next level. And in my portfolio, Asia portfolio alone, we are now working in Sri Lanka, Kyrgyzstan, and going into a number of other countries in Asia, Cambodia as well, with the Luxembourg Trust Fund funding for sustainable finance. So I just wanted to say that before I welcome you. Thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours for the keynote speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Achala. I hope you can hear me. The microphone is a little bit further away. Thank you also to the doctor for the keynote that was preceding me. It's in the name of the government of Luxembourg that I can say that we are very interested in learning about the impact and improving the impact that we can contribute to in the small island states. We are very interested in pursuing these endeavors, and today I would like to give you a little bit more of an insight into what Luxembourg is doing in terms of access to climate finance for the SIDS. So maybe to start with COP28 and in the run-up, COP21, so basically going back to Paris and to the run-up of Paris, Luxembourg committed back then to provide climate finance support for adaptation and mitigation action in developing countries. This support that we call International Climate Finance, or ICF, comes, in Luxembourg's case, on top of official development assistance. And so climate always counts in supplement to that. From 2014 to 2025, we are committing to provide a total of 340 million euros in international climate finance support. The International Climate Finance Program has a dedicated strategy for the allocation of funding, and SIDS are clearly one of the target geographical regions for this, with a specific focus on funding adaptation activities. To give you some examples, Cabo Verde, as one of Luxembourg's development cooperation partners, that's why we have Virginie here also from the Foreign Affairs Ministry, is benefiting from quite a substantial climate finance support for the development and the implementation of its climate policies, for the strengthening of Cabo Verde's climate governance, and also for the reinforcement of its reporting and evaluation monitoring systems. So that's one example in Cabo Verde, but Luxembourg's ICF is not limited to its partner countries, so through its cooperation partner countries. So we go beyond that, as for instance in Fiji, where since 2017, Luxembourg has provided support for the development of what we call the DRUA incubator. And key pillars of that support are, on the one hand, a pilot program on parametric insurance in the context of the Pacific Insurance and Climate Adaptation Program, and on the other hand, a small grant program developed under the newly established DRUA Incubator Innovation Fund to support business and civil society organizations investing in climate risk measures, in water supply, in coastal protection, and other climate resilience measures. The small grant program comes with an explicit focus on addressing gender inequalities and on awareness for loss and damage. Another example, since 2018, Luxembourg is engaged in, let's say, a very fruitful cooperation with GGGI, with the Global Green Growth Institute, in several developing countries. And here I would like to elaborate a little bit further on those specific collaborations with regards to SIDS. So over the past 5 years, Luxembourg has been working quite successfully with GGGI in providing over 3 million euros in donor grants for climate adaptation and climate mitigation in Vanuatu. Through the program that is enhancing resilience to climate change through solar power-driven access to water in the rural areas of the outer islands in Vanuatu, a program, by the way, which has been implemented in close collaboration with Vanuatu's authorities and local communities, Luxembourg has been able to install 37 cyclone-resistant solar-powered water pumping units in the outer islands, establishing basic water distribution networks where needed, including the installation of 4 solar reverse osmosis units. Special features of this infrastructure include Cyclone 4 resistant design of the equipment, which proved already successful in a series of cyclones that you might know that swept over Vanuatu recently. The program also aims at defining a recycling solution for those solar panels at the end of life stage to avoid environmental pollution. That program is also exploring the establishment of an appropriate replication financing mechanism with the National Green Energy Fund in Vanuatu to allow for additional solar water pump deployment for communities where a water billing system already exists. And that National Green Fund in Vanuatu has been pioneered by GGGI and helps to gather and combine what you've already talked about, different donor sources, different funds, to make it easier to handle. So with all that support, we have been able to reach approximately 20,000 direct beneficiaries in Vanuatu alone. The program was also accompanied by an extensive training for the communities to maintain the solar water pumping installations, as well as establishment of those water committees that are active now. So this very successful collaboration led recently to Luxembourg entering another strategic partnership with GGGI aimed at addressing the urgent climate needs of small island developing states in the Pacific and Caribbean regions. Through this collaboration, GGGI's SIDS Climate Action Program, SIDS CAP, will be strengthened and expanded, delivering impactful climate adaptation and mitigation efforts in the SIDS countries. So we're talking about 5 million euros there, funded under Luxembourg's ICF strategy that I mentioned earlier. And it will be delivered over a 5-year program, which will include a collaborative and inclusive decision-making process involving the SIDS governments as well. So the GGGI SIDS Climate Action Program will lead eventually to the avoidance of greenhouse gas emissions equaling 60 million tons of CO2 equivalent, and significantly will strengthen the adaptation capacity and improving the livelihoods of what we can see over 400,000 individuals, with a particular focus on gender equality. And those expected outcomes, to go a little bit further, include creating an enabling policy environment, an enabling capacity building environment, and training to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change. It also includes mobilizing of up to 750 million euros in green and climate finance from public and private sources, so leveraged in that sense. And it includes support and financing of green startups and entrepreneurs locally. So the SIDS program will target clean mobility, it will target climate-smart agriculture, it will target green building support to make buildings more resistant to climate change impacts, as well as build resilience in tourism value chains through nature-based solutions. Loss and damage will also be a component of the program. The overall goal being to help SIDS transition to sustainable models of green growth, strengthen their resilience, and achieve country NDC targets and SDG goals. So I will say not a lot more. Finally, maybe just one more comment on that SIDS program. It is also intended to interact and seek synergies with another thematic program that Luxembourg is currently running. Achala, you mentioned it before, through the GGGI, which is the Global Trust Fund on Sustainable Finance, which is designed to scale up thematic bond markets in the developing countries. So with that, Luxembourg looks very much forward to its collaboration with the GGGI on the SIDS over the coming years and the exchange with all of you, excellencies and dear friends, on this most important topic here today. Thank you from Luxembourg.
Thank you, Thomas, for highlighting the growing and very powerful, actually, portfolio, sustainable finance portfolio of the government of Luxembourg. And I think the impact of the financial support that you provide to small island developing states, I think it's going to go a long way. Thank you for leading from the front when it comes to climate finance discussion, so thank you. I know you have to leave early. Could I check if there are any other panelists in the audience? I know some people arrived late. Maybe not. So can I ask Thomas and Dr. Young, please come to the front and sit down in these two seats so we take a photo together before you leave. Thank you. Dr. Young, can you stay or do you also have to leave? Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. See you. Okay, thank you so much. Now we come to the discussion part. We now have 4 amazing panelists, and I am going to this discussion is on sharing experiences and views on scaling climate finance in small island developing states to support climate action, particularly focusing on adaptation if possible, but I think it's okay to keep the discussion broader if needed. And we have a very, very good panel now. In addition to Dr. Young, who delivered the keynote speech, we have my dear friend and former colleague Deborah Sungi, Manager MRE from the Climate Change and Development Authority, Papua New Guinea, and she's also the chair of the Pacific Regional NDC Hub Steering Committee. Deborah, thank you so much for being here. I know you are super busy, so really appreciate for coming. And then I have Mr. Anselm Dutchrow, who is the Program Director, Climate, Environment and Water of GIZ. We also, at GGGI, we have a very good relationship with GIZ in a number of countries where we are actually implementing in very impactful projects. So very happy to have GIZ here. And then we have Joywin Matthew, who is a partner of DLA Piper. We also have a very good relationship in implementing some of the projects in different regions. So thank you to all of you for being here. I'm going to ask a few questions and you can take your time to answer, perhaps 5 to 6 minutes for your answers. Let me start with Deborah, if that's okay, Deborah. Yeah? So can you share your experience from the Pacific NDC Hub Steering Committee on efficient solutions to scale up climate finance in PNG? Thank you. It's set. You can talk.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Achala, and it's a amazing opportunity again for us to meet after almost 2 years. And thank you as well for the colleagues on the panel with me and all colleagues here. Speaking on behalf and representing the 14 member countries from the NDC regional hub. And on that, we wanted to firstly acknowledge our support that has been given to us through a number of partners, including JZ, for ensuring that we have the regional hub functioning within the Pacific, and it's based in Fiji, which we acknowledge that from the experiences that we have so far with the establishment of the hub, we have an effective communication amongst the focal point from the NDC hub itself. And in a way, it comes back to ensuring that our priority to access finance in terms of strengthening institutions and capacity is always up there, and that is what the hub is trying to achieve through strengthening capacity for all the member countries within the Pacific region, and the support that has been given to us has been in a way sufficient enough to keep us going, but the challenges are real. We have a number of projects that we have currently that still need finance to ensure that we progress them going forward. This year, unfortunately, we have some outstanding projects that we still need to get support from to ensure that we implement in the countries. However, acknowledging the fact that accessing finance have always been the priority for not only Pacific, but all the members of the AOCs. And while we acknowledge that this has been a priority, we also acknowledge the fact that there has been efforts being given, even at international level, to ensure that the process are being replenished and also being seen through to ensure there is access to finance. And a lot of the partners have been coming together to realize that in order for us to have that access, we need our capacity to be built. And it comes back to the speakers that have already been talking in the opening of the session. And Achala pointed it out very, very well. And she's been in PNG, noting that some of us were one head, and not only one head, but one person, and you can manage a lot and being a focal point for a lot of other areas as well, or other organizations or multilateral organizations that you need to deal with. And that capacity needs to be strengthened, and that is always a challenge. But we have been working and we have been progressing. Partners like GGGI and now zooming down to PNG, and our experience is they have been really focusing in terms of ensuring that there is training being given to us and getting all the implementing sectors involved to strengthen their capacity. And we're not only focusing at the national level, but also driving it down to the provincial level. So getting everyone involved, strengthening their capacity so they understand the challenge is there. Most of them don't really understand the process of even developing a very strategic and effective proposal. So those are the things that we are looking at. Very little way, but it comes a long way in a big run. And also the other thing apart from capacity is institutional strengthening and governance. We speak about access, but also we have to realize as a small island developing country, we need those institutional arrangements and the gaps and the governance system to be strengthened in order for us to have that access of finance. And that has been the focus, and we acknowledge the support that has been given, but we are still working towards ensuring that we close the gap and so that we see that effective flow of finance being given to us so that we implement our priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I am going to come back to you later, Deborah, to ask, because we are going to go to the third round of NDC preparation. I call it NDC 3.0. right? Would the NDC hub do something differently? And what is it? But I'm going to come to that question later. And Dr. Young, I also will come to you to ask, because this is also for call for action. What is your call for action before you leave? I know you have to leave in 15 minutes, but I'll come to you as well. Before I come to to you with those questions, I want to go to Anselm and ask. GIZ has been very, very proactive in this space, working in many countries, including small island developing states. I wanted to ask if you have any specific example that you have that you would like to share in terms of supporting small island developing states, particularly scaling up finance. Thank you. You can talk.
Hear me? Is that okay? Thank you very much, Marcella, for this question. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. So myself, I'm not an island specialist, but it was a pleasure to represent GIZ. And as you said, GIZ is very engaged in the Pacific and also in the Caribbean. And maybe just to a general word on GIZ. So we are mandated by the German government to implement some development strategies for them. So if we say it's funded by GIZ, it's actually funded by the German government, and we are the agency putting it in place. And we are in a number of countries working on climate finance issues. We are an accredited entity of the GCF, and we help several countries to build up their direct access strategies, entities. And beyond GCF, we work on NDC support, we work on NDC financing strategies, we work on different other issues. Me, for example, I am in Morocco, I'm based in Morocco. And there we now work on aligning public budget on the NDC, which is a very promising approach and includes obviously the question of CO2 pricing and budget tagging and these kind of issues. So now when it comes to small islands, it's all the challenges have been mentioned, and I couldn't make that. I couldn't do that better, but it's very clear what the problem is. It's the question of the capacities which are in place in different islands. I don't know. As I said, I didn't work directly with them, but I know that some structures from the climate focal point, they have only about 10 people or so, if at all, to work on these issues. The processes are very complex. It was said already. So to design a project and to apply for a project in GCF takes you more than 3 years, and a number of quite cumbersome hurdles need to be tackled. So to overcome this and the logistical questions of the distance of the islands, etc., our approach is to work in collaboration. So it's our motto is dare to cooperate. Try to make alliances with you guys. We have a very trustful and long-standing cooperation with GGGI in the frame of the NDC hub in the Pacific. We have different other partners like the EU in the Caribbean, and it's very self-explaining. The approach is trying to. We made, for example, for these capacity building needs, we made requests on the different islands, and then we look for the actors and partners that are closer to the reality of a defined island, so that we can bring together different competencies. But also kind of taking care that we don't go too fast, because we don't want to do the whole process and the whole thinking and kind of have at the end a proposal which has no country ownership. So it needs to be a sustainable approach, so it can't be too fast either. So it's a real challenge. But so maybe one example of the Caribbean where we had some success, I would say. Now we started the new NDC financing initiative, and it's about peer learning between the islands. And we already have one good experience, which is the adaptation GCF project in Grenada, where we're working on water resilience strategies and have some first really good successes of hotels improving their water management and different other activities to increase water use efficiency. And it's again it's by partnering. So the IKI, the German IKI, is co-financing this project, and GCF is financing 35 million. So this being said, I think the island countries have always been kind of champions for me. I mean, I really want to congratulate for the visibility you have and for the constructive way you're pushing the climate finance and the debate and also the convention as such forward. And the fact that we now have a beginning of a loss and damage fund is basically your merit, and thanks for that, and looking forward to continue cooperating on all these levels, even on the political level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anselm. That was great to bring in some experiences from GIZ, but also I fully agree with you when you congratulated the small island developing states really championing the issue of loss and damage. I was in the Paris negotiations. I was the legal advisor to the chair of the LDC group in the Paris negotiations, and 10 years running up to Paris negotiations, and I knew how difficult it was, how sensitive it was. But now, of course, the funding is still very, very small, but it is a big win for the small island developing states who are really facing the day-to-day impacts of climate change. So thank you very much for mentioning that one too. I want to go to Joywin. I actually intentionally kept you till the end because we have our government partners, we have our implementing partners, and you, for me, is also bringing in a very innovative climate finance instrument, blue bonds. So I wanted to ask your experience, I think you worked in St. Lucia on blue bonds, and wanted to ask you to perhaps talk a little bit about your experience in innovative finance. And I think this climate change discussion really has to have a very big portion of discussion has to be in innovative finance, financing solutions, but maybe it's not happening to the scale and the speed that is necessary. So organizations like yours coming in to bring in that expertise is valuable. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me here, and great to listen to all the other panelists on the great work that you do. Just to introduce myself, I'm a partner in a law firm called DLA Piper, and my work involves working the sustainable finance aspects of things, mostly the debt capital markets side of things. Now, we've been working with a small island developing state. I like to use another term, which is called small island, big ocean state, because it's much more empowering, I feel. Now, we worked with St. Lucia, and on the 3rd of December, we could launch the framework for its blue bonds. And it was quite a significant milestone for the country because it was signaling St. Lucia's ambitions as far as climate resilience and its ability to access the capital markets. The framework that St. Lucia launched, His Excellency, the Minister for Sustainable Development, did that at an event in Dubai itself, which was organized by the United Nations Global Compact and supported by the Center for Climate Diplomacy. The framework, I would like to think that it's one of the first frameworks which actually references the recently launched Practitioner's Guide to Financing a Sustainable Blue Economy, which is a joint effort from the ADB, UNEPFI, UNGC, and the IFC. What we wanted to do was to use this. In fact, this forums like this are important and critical for us to be able to make it known to the wider investor base, the financial sector community, and other stakeholders that there is blue finance which is developing as an asset class and which needs to be supported, and which is going to answer a lot of the questions which the SIDS do face from an access to capital perspective. Today we are on the 11th day of COP. I was here in the past, I've been coming and going for the past few days. On Finance Day, the main theme on one of the discussions with the MDBs was climate finance should be accessible, available, and affordable. So if I am an island state which has a relatively good economy, my GDP has been growing at 14%, I have not defaulted on debt, should I have to face a large cost of capital? That is one of the blocks, impediments which small island or big ocean states face on a day-to-day basis. We heard about how long it takes for a project to be approved and a project to be implemented. 2 years to be approved and 5 years to implement. That cannot wait, because if we talk about 30 by 30 ambitions, etc., to wait for 7 years, to wait for 5 years, it's not going to work. What we need is immediate solutions which can be implemented at pace and at scale. So let's take St. Lucia itself as a great example. It's a country where its economy has been growing post-pandemic. The tourism numbers are growing. But what it really needs is water-resilient wastewater projects to be implemented. It needs to access the bond capital markets, debt capital markets. And what the government has done is they've recognized the potential of blue finance and blue bonds to enable that outcome. What we now need is the support of multilaterals, DFIs, IFIs to step up, walk hand in hand with the government of St. Lucia and other island states, and give them things like credit enhancements, guarantees, backstops. St. Lucia doesn't need a grant. It needs a willing partner to enable it to be an exemplar as far as the SIDS is concerned in using blue finance as a tool to finance immediate and urgent climate resilient projects. On that note, I have lots to say about it, but I do think that the need for SIDS is absolutely immediate. There is no time to waste, in my opinion. I mean, I've been observing how long it takes for approvals from MDB stake or from concessional capital to be available. What I would like to see is a mechanism. For instance, we have something which was being put forward by the ADB, which is the Innovative Finance Facility for Climate for Asia and the Pacific, the IFCAP. Maybe similar mechanisms which can be available for SIDS across the world. But I do think that SIDS are on the front line of climate change. They didn't cause the climate change, but they're having to pay the heavy burden and the price for it. So let's walk hand in hand with SIDS to enable them to, get the outcome that they all deserve.
Thank you, Joivin. Thank you for that powerful statement as well. I'm also a lawyer. When I entered the climate change negotiations, a lot of people asked me what lawyers do in these negotiations. And I used to say that I think all the professions are needed to come into this space and really try to help and work with our countries. But now I think increasingly it's these kind of partnerships that are going to actually make a difference, because we are bringing in these kind of innovative solutions to help our countries. So thank you so much for that. I want to go to Dr. Young. I know you maybe behind for your next meeting. But just want to ask if you had any reactions to our panelists and what they said, and also if you have anything to talk about in terms of calling for action. Thank you.
Thank you, Achilla. I think this has been very rich and it encapsulates, I like your presentation in terms of some of the homegrown solutions. I think across the Pacific and SIDS, AOSIS in general, there's a lot that is being done by our governments with the meager resources and fiscal space that they have, simply because the international architecture has been slow to provide the scale and the speed that is required. And it's almost as a broken record because we keep reiterating these things, and as a result of that, I think you see a lot more leadership coming from our leaders across our regions, and we really need to be able to capture those lessons and try to replicate where possible across the region. In terms of my call to action, I have really four of them. One is we absolutely need a simplification of the access procedures, not only from bilateral sources of funding, but also from the financial mechanisms under the convention. Under the GCF, you have the simplified approval process, but even the independent evaluation unit of the GCF will tell you that it's not simplified. I've always said that speed and scale is not an enemy of transparency and accountability. We could actually do both together, and the 5Cs has demonstrated our capacity to work with bilateral partners to mobilize same amount of finance in a quarter of the time that it would take to go through the mechanisms of some of the funds. And as part of that, we also need partners to not have procedures that are absolutely inimical to the interests of delivery partners. We had to walk away from a project recently from a partner because they were insisting on terms in the contract that would be inimical to our interests. Like, for example, if we didn't spend a certain amount of money in a period of time that we indicated that we would have to spend it, they want to charge us a 5% interest on top of those funds, in addition to what the banks are charging, or they want to withhold so much of the resources as a risk mitigating measure that is greater than the amounts that you need to deliver the program. It's absolutely not the kind of spirit, recognizing that our countries are already capacity constrained, and a lot of these issues are outside the control of the delivery partners. So that needs to be done, and especially when entities have demonstrated their track record and their ability to handle significantly larger sums of money. The second one, we need scale of financing. There has been an absolute deterioration of trust between developed countries and developing countries, particularly AOSIS member countries, because the 100 billion has still not been delivered. The fact that we have not defined climate finance is part of the challenge because people want to count other types of financing, including non-concessional loans towards the accesses. So and then we've been fighting, as you know, for doubling of adaptation finance. I just met with somebody from the Adaptation Fund Board yesterday, and they're about 100 million off from their target from the Adaptation Fund. And we know that when you look at the whole international architecture, we're only getting about 20 cents of every dollar that is going towards adaptation. So the financial gap is actually increasing and will continue to increase with every increment increase in temperatures. The third call to action is that we have to build the capacity and strengthen our direct access entities. Because we don't fly in and fly out. We are invested in the outcomes of our project. We have nowhere to go. And so when we want to build resilience of our country to the effects of climate change, these direct access entities in our regions are very interested in ensuring that the project delivers the outcome because it benefits the very people that we live amongst and have nowhere to go. And then lastly, in the financial mechanisms, there's this sense that particularly SIDS and LDCs, right? But when you look at the delivery of climate finance, those that are particularly identified, like SIDS and NDCs, are actually getting a very small portion of the climate finance. And so we have to ensure that these funds have a way that the governing instrument of the fund or the guidance from the COP is literally delivering finance to those that are particularly vulnerable, including SIDS and LDCs. And until we start to see the amounts of money tracking that designation, then we'll always have a problem, because our capacity to recover, our capacity to build back better is constrained because of our size and our small economies. So those are my 4 call to action, Achilla.
Very powerful. Thank you so much. I started taking notes because those are actually very extremely important call to action, and I hope the online community is also listening, and we will take these as key messages from this session. Thank you so much, Dr. Young. I assume you have to leave now. Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for stepping in for the keynote speech as well. Extremely appreciated. Thanks. So before I go to my 3 panelists on their call to action, let me ask if there are any questions from the audience. I don't know if there is any way to get questions from the online participants. Are there any questions? No questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, moderator and panelists. Michael from Uganda. I'd just like to seek clarification on whether within the definition of small island developing states, even the inland waters, which are not part of the oceans and whatever, are included. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions? No? Okay, so I'm going to come to you to perhaps react to each other's interventions and also talk about, mention your call for action. You may have things to add to the 4 points that Dr. Young brought in as his call for action. So let me start with you. Joyvin, please.
So my call to action is, I come here as a standard bearer for blue finance and how blue finance can be a solution to one of the many problems which SIDS do face. We all know SDG 14 is the most underfunded, and this has been repeated in various forums by various esteemed speakers. What I'd like to say is that just as we've seen the popularity of green finance go from its first issuances, which was actually supported by the EIB in 2007, to a $3 trillion asset class, we would like to see blue finance be one of the solutions in the suite of products which SIDS can face. One of the other issues that was also highlighted is very small island developing states cannot go to the market alone. I would like to see mechanisms in place where blended finance, other structures are put in place where development finance can be accessed by such countries where the size does not permit them to go to the market like a normal sovereign issuer would. In St. Lucia's case, we would like to be, as I mentioned earlier, an exemplar in the region for every other state which faces the same crisis that St. Lucia does in showing the world that blue finance can be one of the pathways to funding a sustainable blue economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyvin. Just a follow-up question. Do you think countries are ready for blue bonds and the blue finance? If not, what do countries have to do to work with the partners that can bring in some experiences?
Some countries are prepared. Some countries, they'll be resource constrained if you're a smaller island nation. The resource constraint has to be addressed by the likes of the GGGI and other institutions. For instance, in St. Lucia's case, I know the GGGI is working as a steadfast partner. In fact, we have a call with the GGGI every Monday to discuss how we can progress its Blue Bond project. And it's institutions such as those who can kind of walk hand in hand to enable that outcome and achieve the results that they need. So from a resource perspective, from a preparations perspective, I do think that, again, I've used this terminology before, it's important to educate and it's about to engage. If you're a country looking to access the capital markets or use blue finance as a method to raise finance, I think it's important to absolutely engage with the investor community, other stakeholders, DFIs, MDBs, so that they all are aware of what you propose to achieve and get your name out there. I do think that having a sort of governance in place within the government is also very important, because unlike a corporate issuer, a lot of the approvals process and everything else has to go through, you have to go through various steps. If there is an understanding that being nimble and quick helps with accessing solutions in a timely manner, that will absolutely help. But I do think that blue finance could be one of the answers to, not the only answer, but one of the answers to the many questions which SIDS countries ask of each other.
Thank you, Joybin. I know we also had a question from the audience. Do you have anything to add to?
So inland water would come under SDG 6, and I've asked this question. I've been asked this question in other forums as well. So blue finance is not. I mean, as we speak, the focus is very much about SDG 14, which is life under water or related to the oceans. But to the extent it comes under SDG 6, there is the argument to be made that it can be one of the solutions from a thematic perspective.
Thank you very much, Joybin. Ansa, what is your call to action, and do you have also reaction to your panelists? Thank you.
Thank you. No, very interesting panel discussion. I personally would add as an action is that we have to change into an urgency mode for the whole of government. I think we all sometimes think that climate action can be financed by projects, and it's not anymore the case. I think we have to change like the economy as such, and the way we plan our sustainable development, taking into account the climate threats and the climate opportunities, if you want, for sustainable development. And so instead of talking about project financing, I would really rather think of, seeing it as a challenge that involves all national resources with international help, including the question of debt, of course. And so this applies particularly also for the small islands. The other point maybe is that we even knowing that on small island states the economy is not so diversified and it's far away from markets, and it challenges a tremendous amount of logistical challenges that other countries do not challenge. I would still think we could do a bit more for that. And this is what we started in the Caribbean in building this NDC financing initiative, which is bring together to matchmaking meetings more project developers, technology providers, financiers, philanthropy, all together, and do that regularly and identify like really sustainable investment opportunities that go in the right direction. These would be my 2 points.
Thank you so much. And I fully agree, particularly for small island developing states, climate change is not a project. It's the whole economy, it's the whole society. So we really have to think at that scale to bring in finance as well for the country. So thank you so much. Deborah, I'm coming to you the last. What is your call to action, and do you have any reactions to your panelists and also any answer to our colleague from the audience? Thank you.
Thanks, Chilla. And I guess we've said a lot of experience and in terms of noting the challenges, they all speak for itself. For us as the region in the Pacific and also as a country in Papua New Guinea, we all share the same experience. And the two key messages that I wanted to again reiterate from what our colleagues and panelists have already mentioned in terms of one, ensuring that the capacity of the existing institutions within the countries in terms of ensuring that they have direct finance to access is very, very critical. I am saying that given that the challenge that we face is when we have, and it is very practical within PNG and also within the region where we have a lot of fund managers that I'll put it in that way. We get to split up the funding that comes from either from the governments that are supporting us, and along the way we get to end up with a very minimum amount of fund that will only assist us to build a plan or a policy. Again, we really want to see something that we can have support that will strengthen our institutions to have the direct access that comes in that full portion that can really actually develop projects at the end of the day. And that is what these small island countries and I guess with the Pacific, that what we wanted to see. So strengthening the institutional arrangements and the capacity to have direct access is very, very key and paramount for us. Again, going back to the other point that I wanted to make in terms of key message is ensuring that in this process of multilateral organizations and discussions and under the UNFCCC process, climate finance still is and has to be defined. Until then, we will still face the challenge that we have seen with the 100 billion goal that we have not achieved. And this is very practical when we are speaking and we are talking about and we are negotiating the scale of finance and the quantum under the new climate quantifiable goal. Until and then, if there is a definition of climate finance, then it will actually direct us to ensure that we have quantum that we know where exactly and what exactly is climate finance. So this is actually the two key messages that I wanted to reiterate on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. That was very good additions from your side as well. So we are coming to the end of this side event, focusing on climate change finance access and particularly focusing on small island developing states. And I want to go through quickly the few key points that I noted down as call for action. Simplify access. Think about scale, think about speed, and build capacities, both human and institutional, and also deliver finance where it is needed. We talk about new and innovative instruments like Blue Bond. We have to, when it comes to scale, I think we have to think about innovative instruments like Blue Bonds and work with resource partners to the extent that is appropriate. Think about access to capital markets for these countries, educate, and also be on the urgency mode so that we are not complacent, thinking that actually climate change is happening somewhere in future. No, it is happening now for our countries, especially island countries, and think at scale, which is at whole economy level when it comes to small island developing states, and also support countries to really directly access finance so that we can reduce transaction cost and strengthen capacities of our governments and our partners. So with that, I really want to thank our colleagues, panelists who are here, also to Government of Luxembourg for being a leader in climate finance space, Benelux and EIB Pavilion for hosting us here, to the 5Cs, to the government of Papua New Guinea, to GIZ, as well as PLA Piper for being here and really adding your very, very valuable, insightful, and useful thoughts and this call for action for island countries for accessing climate finance. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.